All right, so let's then think about looking at the content of the questions. So a lot of the next few slides are going to be kind of do's and don'ts of developing questions. Um, so one of the things we need to be really wary of is this thing called a double-barreled question. We do not want to use double-barreled questions. So for example, a double-barreled question would be something like, do you think Coca-Cola is a tasty and refreshing soft drink? Now, why is that a double-barreled question? Well, that's because we're really asking about two different things in the same question. So perhaps someone thinks that Coca-Cola is refreshing but not very tasty. Um, so we need to ask about those two different criteria, those two different characteristics separately. Do you think Coca-Cola is a tasty soft drink? And another question would be, do you think Coca-Cola is a refreshing soft drink? We have to just separate those. We have to separate those and keep them out of our, keep them distinctive so that we can get accurate data. Another thing we need to consider with the content of our questions is what can the respondent actually answer? So for example, we might say, how many gallons of soft drinks did you consume during the last 4 weeks? Now I want you to think for a second. Can you tell me how many gallons of any kind of drink you consumed within the last 4 weeks? Probably not. You might be able to tell me how many gallons your household went through in the last 4 weeks, because milk actually does come in gallons, and that's the most typical size for people to purchase. So that might be a reasonable question if we were asking about household usage of milk. But in this case, we're talking about soft drinks. So um, a better question would be, how frequently do you consume soft drinks during the week, at a typical week? Okay, and then we can say, give them some options here, so they're not trying to think of the actual specific number. They can choose from 4 different options. So that's helpful, giving them the options, and also making sure that it is in some sort of units that a person can remember. So perhaps we don't know if they're drinking a 12-ounce can or a 20-ounce bottle, but we're still going to get better data than if we ask someone how many gallons of soda they drink in a week. Okay. All right, so then the next issue is another part that is of this idea of respondents not being able to answer something. Okay, can they articulate their answer? So for example, you might want to find out about the atmosphere, the ambiance of different department stores. However, you might not want to ask them the broad question of, please describe the atmosphere of Macy's department store. You would need to come up with the different characteristics of the atmosphere and then ask the respondent about each of those particular characteristics. And maybe it's the lighting and the temperature and the cleanliness and the helpfulness of employees and the width of aisles. Okay, you could have a wide variety of things that you think fit under the atmosphere of a department store. So instead of asking them to come up with that, you're going to provide those, and you're going to provide the ones that would be important for you to understand based on your research problem. Okay. We also may want to consider using things like pictures, maps, detailed descriptions, and other media when we are compiling our survey, so that they can better articulate their responses. So let's say, for example, we are coming up with a new children's toy, and we've come up with this idea, and we want to get children's feedback on it. What is going to be the best way to get feedback on that potential toy that we want to make? Well, let's think about the target audience, or really any audience. It doesn't have to be children. would it be more effective to give a detailed description in paragraph form, or to have the participant watch a mock advertisement about the product? Most likely, whether the participant is an adult or a child, they're going to have better responses if you give them that better media, the visual media plus the sound and the words, having all three of those senses activated at once, as opposed to just a written description. That's going to help elicit better responses. So maybe you could say, describe what you like about this toy. Describe why you would consider purchasing this toy for your child. Describe the features that you think this toy has that are unique to this toy, that aren't found in other toys. If you give them more memory aids, then they will be able to provide better responses to that. And then you may follow up with some specific criteria that you want to ask about, because they might not come up with everything that you've thought of. Next issue we want to talk about is unwillingness to answer. So when respondents are unwilling to answer questions, sometimes it's because we haven't made it easy for them. Sometimes it's because it's sensitive information or a controversial subject. It is important that we make things as easy and simple as possible while maintaining high standards. Okay, so for example, we could say, please list all the departments from which you purchased merchandise on your most recent trip to a shopping trip to a department store. Okay, so here they're going to have to think back to their most recent trip to a department store. They're going to have to think of what they purchased, and then they're going to have to come up with the categories themselves. And that might prove to be a little bit tricky. Is it, do they categorize it by women's apparel versus men's apparel? Or is it formal dresses and casual dresses and suits and athletic wear? Or do they categorize it by sizes, petites, plus, women's, juniors? Do they categorize it by the designer, right? The designer for each of the areas of the store. They may not come up with the same categories that you're even looking for. And so then it makes if you can't compare those two between respondent A and respondent B and respondent C, because everybody picked different types of categories, then not only are you not going to be in trouble, but it's also just difficult because they don't know what you're actually asking. So it's more likely that they just won't want to answer the question. So they will skip that question, or they'll just quit the entire questionnaire because it was too difficult. So instead, we could do something like this. In the list that follows, please check all the departments from which you purchased merchandise on your most recent shopping trip to a department store. And then we provide those categories for them. And all they have to do is select the ones they purchased from. That makes it much easier for them. Respondents also may be unwilling to answer questions when they don't see the connection from the question to the research topic at hand. So sometimes we actually put in unrelated questions that seem unrelated, but actually do have a purpose. So for example, we might put in specific questions that are designed to determine if the person if our respondent is answering questions based on what they think we want to hear. There's actually a standardized set of questions that we can ask that help us understand if the other answers that the respondent gave are what we call that they gave socially desirable answers. Okay. Those questions may seem unrelated, so we need to work them into the survey so that they do feel related and appropriate to the survey at hand. We need to make sure that it seems legitimate. We want to make sure that when we provide more detail about the purpose or the request, that legitimacy helps participants be willing to actually answer the questions. We're conducting this survey in order to, create better services or improve our customer service, or further understand people like you, et cetera, et cetera. Providing information so that the participant feels like and understands that the survey request is a legitimate request for data. And then finally, sensitive information is a big one with unwillingness to answer. This could be things like just sensitive categories of information, age, income, socioeconomic status. This could be other types of questions that might make the participant just feel uncomfortable or threaten their self-image. They might want to respond in a certain way that maintains their self-image, but maybe isn't truthful. And so they may actually just be unwilling to answer if you ask them anything that makes them feel uncomfortable like that. So there are ways that we can ask some of these questions. Part of that is that legitimate purpose, explaining why we need to understand these different questions and the data, or putting things in a certain order, phrasing things in a certain way that reduce that discomfort for our participants. Okay. So for example, a lot of times we will place our sensitive topics at the end of the questionnaire. For example, a lot of times we collect demographic information at the very end of the survey. Gender, income, educational status, do you own or rent your home, race, ethnicity, all those types of things. A lot of times we put them at the end. And one of the reasons we do that is because some of them can be sensitive. People don't particularly like giving their age or their income. And so typically we'll put them at the end. We'll also give them ranges. So instead of selling, which of these is your exact income or enter your income, we give some broader ranges. Maybe it's up to 25,000, 25,000 to 50, 50 to 75, and so on and so forth. And there we get more responses because we're just giving that range and it's at the end. Sometimes if we are asking about a behavior that people may be embarrassed about, I don't know. And then we're going to try to normalize it before we ask them a question about it. So maybe it's, I don't know, something like, we've found that popping your pimples is a common thing for people to do. And then proceed to ask, how likely would you be to pop a pimple that appeared on your face? I don't know, that's a silly example, but it would be something that would be, you can normalize the behavior and then ask questions about it. Okay. You could also hide the question in a group of other questions. People are typically very willing to respond, just sort of try to incorporate some of those more uncomfortable questions amongst more comfortable questions. And then I already mentioned the categories. We could use this for income. We also often use this for age as well, giving age ranges instead of asking consumers to just put their actual age in. So now we're going to talk about question structure. We can use structured questions, we can use unstructured questions, or a combination of the two in our surveys. Unstructured questions are going to be open-ended questions where respondents can respond in their own words. It could be we're just asking for one word or a couple of words or a paragraph or a list of things. This could be things like occupation, a favorite, anything, actor, actress, food. You could have them select one of those, or you could have them just enter it in. Just generally, what do you think about people who shop at high-end department stores? What do you think about people who, I don't know, attend small religious colleges? What do you think about people who homeschool? What do you think about people, whatever? What do you think about companies advertising on social issues instead of their product? All kinds of things you could ask here, but all of those would be unstructured questions. Okay, the just eliciting whatever response the participant wants to give. Structured questions are going to ask the question and then give alternatives. Which of the following is your favorite actor? List the top 10 most common, most favorite actors or highest paid actors. Okay. Typically, we're going to have multiple choice answers. It could be a scale like we talked about in the last two chapters. There might be dichotomous answers, but that's going to be a little bit rarer. So multiple choice questions. This could be a scale like definitely will not buy to definitely will buy. You might even have other in there, but that's not going to be very common. Dichotomous questions are going to be a yes, no, or agree, disagree. Sometimes you might also put in no opinion or don't know. Now, this is going to be significantly rarer than any of these other possible question structures. Typically, we would rather ask something on a multiple choice or a scaled choice than we would a yes or no choice. So when you go to create your survey for your client for in the group project, I highly encourage you to avoid yes, no questions. If you put them in there, I'm going to tell you to take them out. And so I would highly recommend that you just avoid those to begin with. You're going to get much better data if you do, if you use other types of answers. So my formatting got off here, but scales, we discussed these in depth in chapter 8 and 9. So do you intend to buy a car within the next 6 months? So here we have a standard Likert scale, 1 through 5.